Tonight on EWTN Live, we'll get an update on how the Catholic Church is doing in the United Kingdom. And we'll talk about some different ways you and your family can celebrate Marian feast days throughout the year. So please stay with us. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch and welcome to EWTN Live, which is our chance to bring you guests from all over the world, which is exactly what we're doing tonight. Our guest is a Catholic journalist based in London, England, and she's known to our EWTN viewers mostly through her TV series, Feasts and Seasons of the Church, but also through her blog, A Catholic Journalist in London, which is on EWTN.com, where she keeps us up to date on the happenings of the Catholic Church in England. So please welcome good friend, Joanna Bogle. Joanna, good to see you. Good to have you here and welcome.
It's terrific to be back. It's great.
Good.
I love it.
You're working on a brand new series with this, and it's part of your same series overall, right?
Yes, we've been doing Feasts and Seasons of the Year, and I had the thought, why don't we look at Mary's feasts? And it's a rather different take on the thing. My family teased me about this. Here comes Auntie Joanna. Oh gosh, she's going to make us do something bizarre, you know.
Did you?
No, but I thought I'd be a little gentler this time, and we're looking at Our Lady's feasts during the year. My nephews, who are now grown up, have never forgotten when I took them wassailing, and the neighbours haven't forgotten either.
What was wassailing?
Well, you go from house to house and have a drink and sing carols and spread Christmas good cheer, but you do it after Christmas as a sort of New Year thing, as a sort of jolly thing, and you bless their apple trees. Yes, the neighbours thought we were a bit odd, but it's awfully jolly, and they thought our family was a bit eccentric anyway. So I thought this time, I mean, it was all sort of jokey and fun, but the family, well, it made me think, perhaps we've done enough cooking and so on. I wanted to look at Mary's feasts, and so it's a slightly different take, but yes, it's Feasts and Seasons.
So, well, what is the difference? What makes it so different?
Well, what makes it mostly different is that I got very interested in something that's actually happening in our parish at home where I live in New Malden, St Joseph's, New Malden. Yay, very good parish. They created, a lovely couple, the Surridges, Malcolm and Felicity Surridge, created a Mary garden. There had long been a statue of Our Lady outside the church. It's not a particularly old or beautiful church. It's quite a modern 1930s building. But they created a beautiful Mary garden with all the flowers and shrubs and herbs named after Our Lady. And this is a very old tradition in England, and I'm guessing elsewhere as well. Going back to medieval times, the monastery gardens, the herbs and the flowers that are honouring Our Lady. And I thought that was such an interesting idea. So I've made that part of the theme for celebrating the Marian feasts of the year, because there's so much to discover with the different herbs and flowers that you can weave them into the different feasts. It's not the only thing I'm doing. There are lots of other ways of celebrating the feast.
Well, here's something I've never thought of. I learned to cook from my mother. She was pregnant with my baby brother, and she had a slip disc, so she told me to cook, and I didn't. My mother was a wonderful cook and a good teacher. But I never, you know, with all the herbs and spices I've used, I've never associated any of them with Mary.
No, and I hadn't really, although there are some that are very connected. For example, lavender, and the Latin, that comes from to wash, think of the lavabo at Mass. This gives us lavender, which gives us words like laundry. Well, you can see why it's associated with cleanliness, because it's a lovely, clean, minty smell. And lavender soap is one of the oldest scents of soap. But the legend is that Mary threw her laundry over a lavender bush, and that's why it's so gloriously scented and so on. So from the earliest times, it's been associated with Mary's herb used for washing. And rosemary, well, the name echoes Mary, although we think it might have come from rose Maris, the dew of the sea, but it's certainly connected with Mary, and that's an incredibly useful herb with that clean, minty smell.
Yes, yes.
It keeps flies away if you hang a bunch of it in the kitchen. You use it, of course, in cooking, as you would know, roast lamb, for example. And rosemary jelly is extremely nice. Make an ordinary apple jelly and rosemary. But again, it's connected with healing, and so is sage, which is known as Mary's shawl, those shawl-like leaves, and it really is rather good against headaches if you put some in a little bread and butter sandwich, or you can make sage tea, which I think tastes revolting, but you know, it'll get rid of your headache. And there's all of these things. Mary is associated with things that are beautiful and lovely, but also useful. And then there are flowers, I mean, obvious ones. Marigold, Mary's gold,
Sure,
you see. And that the Old English word is tansy. You can make a tansy tea. And these are sort of
you
humble
make tea out of
flowers.
marigold?
Well, out of the leaves, yes, out of the leaves. And dried them. And I just find all this very attractive. And then a number of roses are named after Our Lady, and there's lots of different legends about roses. And the lily, pretty well every great painting of the Annunciation shows Mary or the angel and a lily, and this is Mary's purity and so on. And that's quite intriguing in culture in England, because you had a lot of pubs in medieval times named after the Annunciation, often called the Annunciation, but sometimes called the Salutation. And then when Catholicism was crushed and so on, they got rid of Mary from the pub sign, and in some cases the angel as well. So you're left with the lily, and you've got pubs that are called the flower pot. So it's kind of intriguing. So by the time you've got a Mary garden, you've got all of this fascinating history woven in, but you can grow flowers, you can cook with, so I just find all this was rather good fun.
Well, you know, one of the other things is that in the importance of the lily in the Song of Songs,
yes, that's
is very key, and it became a tradition, at least by St. Bernard's time and others, to interpret a lot of the Song of Songs as a song about the Blessed Virgin. So there is that kind of combination of all the spices listed in there.
That's
in
very
describing of the do I need to come on your show?
Yes, because I was actually thinking the whole idea of a garden enclosed is my beloved. And,
yes,
and
that's
so
right.
So there is this idea, and Mary is the enclosed garden, the Virgin. This is all beautiful stuff. I hadn't thought also about the spices and so on. And I think all this is a bit richer than just let's go wassailing at Christmas, as it were. And I think there's something going on here about the domestic church. We can make a Mary garden in our own home. It's also quite a good project to do. For example, a parish like New Malden, where the church is on the main road. I mean, it's a gift to the local community. There's a pretty garden there. Yeah. And you can put up a nice little plaque with each one commemorating somebody who you loved, who died, and so on. So there's lots of parish history and local history, and there's a lot of love in all of that. And then what about Catholic schools? I mean, a lot of children, they don't really think about where their food comes from. You know, it just grows in packets, doesn't it? And you whinge about it, don't like that, and all that sort of stuff. So why don't we get a connection again with food and growing and watering and also making things beautiful? I quite like the idea of a lot of London children sort of digging and planting marigolds. It just sort of gives me a deep sense of sort of slightly lunatic satisfaction. And I think there's
Wait a minute, what's lunatic about that? That sounds very sane.
You know what I mean? There's a sort of sense in which today they're always encouraging children to do things that they do anyway, like building their self-esteem, of which most children have lots anyway. They all think they're right, you know. So I think you want to build up things that they haven't got, like digging and planting, and an association with history. Many children won't understand about a monastery garden, but they will if you teach them, especially if they're making a garden. And the idea of a rosary, connected with a rose bush, for example, be rather nice with rose bushes in a ring and name them after the different mysteries, and there's some lovely stuff you could do. And this is all outdoor stuff,
garden
which
where
is
they set stones in the ground of a garden in the pattern of a rosary.
It's lovely.
And then they had a garden all around those stones, and you could actually walk the rosary.
Yeah, I find all this lovely, you see. And I got very interested when I've been doing the Feasts and Seasons, which began as a book and then became an EWTN thing and has become a slightly tiresome hobby for me and my friends. Here we go, she's going to make us have an Ascension meal or something. But great fun to do. But I'd rather missed out on this, the garden side of it. And then, of course, there's lots of lovely craft work, lavender bags, a very good way of keeping moths away from clothes, makes the room scented beautifully. Tucking a lavender bag under your pillow will help you sleep. So there's a lot of other uses for herbs, not just cooking. And then, by extension, other things that you make. And one of the things I'm interested in is there is, you can stretch this a bit too far, but there is quite a revival of handcrafts and things that at one stage, certainly when I was a teenager, nobody was really doing much in the way of sort of cross-stitch or patchwork quilts, although I've always been interested in that. But it's really quite a big thing now, and you get these handcraft shops and so on. I think the church ought to be there where there is this longing. It's got something to do, I think, with a quite wholesome sense of nostalgia for the real and the authentic and the beautiful, and something to do with not liking instant food, and even connected with some of the rather cruel factory farming where animals have ceased to have a connection with human beings at all and so on. And Pope Benedict spoke about this, again, a country boy growing up in Bavaria with a great sense of understanding of that. And he has written very tenderly of his mother, who was a very good cook, of course. And there's some lovely things going on with all of this. That I think this is quite a strong form of evangelization. Sure. And the church has always been there. The church has always been the domestic church. It's always been about what we do, make, cook, eat, and sing. And I just think we have to build on that.
Yeah, and certainly our First Lady, Michelle Obama, has been trying to encourage people to do gardens for the food quality, improve our health, and all that. And this might be another way to augment that, seeing that spices and herbs are not just in little jars and packets, but they really grow in your own home, and to show that connection with the Blessed Mother. Yes,
and there is this worry about, I mean, certainly in Britain, the biggest single health issue, I mean, there are lots, but the biggest single one is obesity. Or to put another word, we're all too fat, you know. So we've lost the family meal, which is also a place of hospitality and laughter and fun and gentle family discipline and so on. So properly cooked food and an understanding of where it comes from, and then gratitude to the good God who gives it. And food has a sacred quality. We bless the food before we eat it. We shouldn't waste it. There's this horrible thing now where you buy enormous packets of stuff in a supermarket that you perhaps can't use, so you throw it away because you can't use it all, so it goes stale before it's used and so on. Or this buy one, get one free, and then throw that one away, in effect, but, you know, in practice. And I've often noticed this. You find yourself losing the connection between work and care and the food you eat. You just sort of shovel it down. And we were speaking about this earlier in one of these wonderful EWTN conversations you have with people who are here, and we were all agreeing that it happens to all of us. It's not just something they get wrong, it's something I get wrong. So I too am a sort of, well, I'll buy something at the supermarket and maybe want to start munching it on the bus going home. This isn't civilized. And I think having a proper understanding of food, well, a good way of doing it is to link it with a calendar. Feasting and fasting. Marian feasts with something that is associated with Mary. And then the great feasts of the year, which I've done in previous programs, you know, Easter and Ascension and Pentecost. And I like obscure foods for obscure saints, you know, I find all that kind of fun.
Oh, it is.
Although, as I said, my family sort of like tendency to sort of tease me about this, and they're convinced I make some of it up, you know. I don't, I do look at it. And I'm not even that good at cooking. I mean, I'm not one of these people that sort of really am fascinated by the minutiae. I just like the ordinary down-to-earth reality of it. And our faith is incarnational. Mary really was the mother of the Christ child. She cooked and she cleaned, and Christ did things with stuff, with earth and spirit and so on. And I think we need to have this incarnational idea. It's not just about words. It's the word made flesh. Yes. I think it's all terribly important.
And things that we do that anyone, it's not for theologians to think great thoughts, but women have always evangelized by explaining why they do these things in their gardens, in their homes, in their cooking, and so on. And that was part of the home catechesis.
Home catechesis. I mean, I think for most of us, for example, our first discovery of Good Friday and the idea you're not eating meat. And many families, including mine when I was growing up, had a particular thing that you ate on Good Friday.
Yes.
And with us, it was actually always kedgeree, fish and rice. And I remember a boyfriend, my first serious boyfriend, his family had a rather revolting dish that included baked beans, tinned baked beans, and that was called Good Friday lunch. And I was appalled. Everybody knew you had kedgeree. They were obviously pagan. But there was this idea that you don't, and this was discussed in advance, that you would have one main meal on Good Friday. And obviously Christmas lunch and all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of evangelization that goes on in that, because in the kitchen, you're asking your mother, why are we doing this? Or she's explaining, and then the cross on a hot cross bun and the special cake for Mothering Sunday, which is baked a bit secretly, you know, Daddy telling Mummy not to come into the kitchen, it's going to be a surprise. I think all of that, and then when you travel and you eat something, I think this is evangelization, and you're right, it's definitely something that women can do and should do well. And we're losing these skills, and girls are being de-skilled, to use an ugly expression, but you can sense that. They don't have the confidence that, yes, I'm in charge of this and I will do this. And there's a certain authority. We are going to do this. I want you to turn up on time and make this a proper family occasion. And there's a real confidence that you have in this, which gives you a sense of self-worth. I think that is something that we do need. And instead, we've equipped children to believe that they've got to be clever and pass exams and that they know everything anyway, but we haven't given them practical skills. And boys and girls both need these.
I think so. Well, that sounds, I look forward to seeing this series.
Thank you.
But I'd also like to have you talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on in Great Britain today in the Catholic Church. You know, you're a journalist. I expect you to keep up with everything. So what's going on over in Great Britain?
You know, there was this thing where you sort of said, do you want the good news or the bad news, you know?
Yes.
Well, the bad news, and there's an awful lot of that, so we've got simply masses and masses of possibilities to choose. Which bad bit of news? Probably the most depressing, although there's a good many contenders for this, is the imposition of same-sex marriage. This comes into effect at the end of this month.
That's in England?
In England and in, yes, England, Wales, Scotland. It's across the kingdom because Scotland's voted for it as well. Yes, our very infuriating Prime Minister, who seems to be a man of almost no values at all, really, it's quite astonishing, really, sort of value-free, has imposed same-sex marriage. And this will not only mean that two people of the same sex can get married with a massive legal and other ramifications, the full implications of which we have not understood, but it is going to be difficult for Christians, because although, of course, the law doesn't say that you have to agree with the law, in practice you do. If you are a magistrate, borough councillor, headmaster, even somebody like a senior policeman, and you said, I think it's a stupid law, it's a rotten idea, sordid and nasty, likely to cause massive legal problems with what do we mean by the word grandchild and so on, and why stop at 2 people, why not 9 or 3? Or
as a matter of fact, that's already being proposed in one of our states.
I can believe
to
it.
have multiple folks, polygamy, polyandry.
Well, if you can't discuss this, and you can't, because if I were to make such a remark as the one I've just made, for example, in a measured way, as a magistrate at a dinner of magistrates, I'd get the sack. Now, why?
I mean, in American, you got fired.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes, I'd be fired. Extraordinary way you have a talk.
That's okay, I speak both.
Yes, yeah, well, I know. Well, I just find with America, if I wait and throw the words around, you think, well, I'll understand what the chap's saying in a while, you know. Yes, I'd be fired, as they say. And there's a slightly scary feeling, because in the Britain I grew up in, and the Britain we've always been taught about, the right to disagree with the government was absolutely normal. And we were told that this was a right that had been given to us at immense cost,
Over the centuries.
Yes, and particularly cherished in the 20th century, consecrated by the blood of men who died for this. So I feel like my right to say, I think this is an absolutely stupid law, with a great many unforeseen consequences, is absolutely normal. And if I were somebody in mild public office, I would feel this would be a very good thing to say at some formal event. You know, an annual dinner or prize giving, you can't. Nobody says you can't, but everybody knows you'd get the sack. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried about schools, particularly Catholic schools, that in fact are not obliged to teach that same-sex marriage is all right, but they think they are.
Well,
I find that really scary, that they think, well, won't a government inspector come? And I said, well, if he does, tell him to push off. Doesn't matter what you think about same-sex marriage. You can say it's a stupid idea, it's a free country, and it doesn't feel free anymore.
But see, this is something that's also happening here. There was one man on television who, in an interview, not even on his show, said, you know, I don't dislike people who have same-sex attractions or anything, but, you know, this is not marriage. I'm a Christian. I don't believe that. And there was a strong attempt to sack him, that is, fire him, you know, from being on his own show. But his family stood with him, so they didn't. But you know, this is a temptation.
Yes, it seems to me this is an ill thought out and stupid piece of legislation, and it behoves those of us who are interested in such things and love our country to discuss it properly, and you can't. So that's a really bad piece of news with implications not yet fully understood. I think within the church there are signs of hope. Not many, but some.
I just want to add,
there's good news as well as bad.
You know, one of the concerns that we have in this country, I don't know if it's true in England, but if you do try to discuss it, you're called phobic or a hater. And, you know, that's not the issue.
No, of course not.
It's an issue of, let's take a look at these ramifications and the data and such. And that becomes something that gets squashed. And we have to be able to discuss these issues clearly, like adults, based on data, and not just squelch it.
And to me, hatred doesn't come into it. I don't hate somebody who disagrees with me on this subject. And I've had people who hate me. They're very kind and right to explain to me how much they hate me. You know, they do so on the internet. And, you know, it's very thoughtful of them, really. Let me know of their views. And so once or twice, one said he was going to kill me, which was kind, but didn't know where I live. So anyway, he hasn't killed me, so it's rather a waste of effort,
By the way,
really.
in this country, that is illegal.
Oh, I think it's illegal in Britain as well, but he was somebody writing to me on the internet, so who knows where he lived. Anyway, I didn't print his comment. And there we are. It's his problem, not mine. But I think that, you know, the thing I find annoying is, of course nobody hates. I would just want to discuss why I think this is extremely stupid and probably wicked law. And for Christians, it's a very profound issue because marriage is Christ and his bride, the church. It's the fundamental thing. It's the generation of new life. There's lots of deep, good stuff going on here. As a Catholic journalist, I want to explain it and discuss it. And indeed, it's a very strong way of evangelizing because marrying and having children is such a deep experience shared by so many that for many, many people it's a time when they are going to encounter the good God. The wonder of a new child arriving and this sort of thing. And prosaically for Catholics, marriage is when a lot of people return, at least in a general sense, to the church. I've been very privileged to do marriage preparation groups in London, and I very much enjoy it. It's great fun. And it's a wonderful time of encounter. They're mostly non-practicing Catholic. I very much enjoy the contribution that one can make. Is I don't know, I'm probably quite useless. They probably think, funny old woman in the green suit, you know. But I love doing it. And it's a moment of evangelization, and more than a moment, it's a deep encounter. So to lose all this because we have to pretend that two people of the same sex can marry is just nonsense. I'm worried about this. There's good news in Britain as well. There always is. There's always a light.
Tell us the good news.
Well, there's some good news in the church. Not masses, but there's some good news. We're sort of holding our own. The number of vocations to the priesthood in the south of England, in London, is rising. And I went to Allen Hall, the Westminster Diocesan Seminary, the other day. I was meeting somebody there, and it was this marvellous sense of bustle and that's the wrong expression, of vigour and strength. And I was very impressed with this. This is where men are training to do the great thing, and I liked that. It was great. And that's good. And then another thing which has been a sign, so there's a minor rise in vocations. Let's not exaggerate this, and London is not England. There is a bit of a north-south divide, which is rather tragic, given that the old heartland of Catholic Lancashire, it doesn't seem to be producing the vocations in the same way. But there is a slight rise, and there are some good trends. And then the other piece of, I think, very good news is the ordinariate of Our Lady of Walsingham, the Anglicans who've come into full communion with the Catholic Church. And this is a source of, I think, great hope and very much enriching to our Catholic life. also at the level of culture, which is something that we've just been discussing as well. So that's a sign of great hope. I'm conscious too that this is a good time to evangelize, especially for lay people. There are now far more young people who were brought up on the John Paul Benedict Catechism of the Catholic Church, World Youth Day mood. It may only be a mood, but it's a very positive mood. So, for example, the idea of going to confession is, for most younger Catholics, and of course there are plenty of non-Catholics and non-practicing ones, but for younger Catholics it's associated with something you do, perhaps at some great event, perhaps with quite a deep experience that you might want to talk about and share with your friends. Oh, that was a beautiful experience. Certainly with a great sense of sharing in God's glorious mercy, perhaps something very beautiful, and perhaps quite a real encounter in which a priest gave you wise counsel, wise advice. It's not associated with a routine thing you have to do in a slightly ritual way in a cold church that you hate doing. Now, there was an advantage in going regularly in a cold church and not always enjoying it. I understand that. Yeah, but the sight of kids doing this in the open air under the trees at World Youth Day is very attractive. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, having heard confessions at, various events, sometimes, just a lot of us lining up chairs and people forming lines to go. This is something that, and it's a profound experience for us priests too, because many people are, in a moment of religious reflection, and they're not, I don't find them just, twisted by some guilt complex, but it's rather, it's a way that they integrate the shadows and dark side of themselves with the light. They see, yeah, I've done bad things, I've done good, and this is who I am, and I give that to God, and He loves me.
That's sort of the way young people would sort of talk about it, and I'm thinking about, yes, young people who describe it in those terms. Youth 2000 has these big rallies at Walsingham, the Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham in the Norfolk countryside. It's a sort of mini World Youth Day every summer. And the faith movement that I've been involved with, again, a great summer jamboree. So it's associated with sharing a deep experience of renewal with your peers. Perhaps for some, a real re-encounter with a Lord they had known a little from childhood, but they come from families where the parents are not practicing their faith. And back of that is a sort of image of World Youth Day. This is a large, exciting gathering on a beach at Rio thing. This is an all-gathering in Cologne with Pope Benedict thing. This is Australia, this is whatever. And so even a mini version of that has that, let's say, heritage. And I think all that's very positive. And I've myself had, yes, this experience. I remember quite amusingly some years ago now, I went to a Youth 2000 event. I was giving a talk there. And we had this marvellous talk by a nun about confession and forgiveness, and it was all beautiful. And then somebody said, keep our brothers busy, meaning the priests who were going to hear all around this tent, you see. And I thought, well, how lovely, all these young people are going to go. And I thought, no, it's also for me. Why don't you go, Joanna, you twerp? The message is for you as well. So I went, and the priest was sitting with his hand over his eyes like this. And as I knelt down, he held up his hand, meaning stop a moment. And he said, before you begin, I just want to say, you young people, you're giving us back our faith. And I thought, I better tell the chap this. So I said, Father, this is very kind, but if you could see me, I'm not that young or something. And we both had a good laugh. But it was I thought, what a beautiful thing that he was saying that to young people. Also, it was good for me, I have to say. It was sort of fun and lovely. But it was just amusing. You young people are giving us back our, no, he didn't say faith, priesthood, sorry. Yes. Giving us back our priesthood. That's what I meant, I mean faith. He had a lot. Isn't that a beautiful expression?
It is, it is.
And I thought, how lovely. I mean, so there is that. And that is beginning to affect the number of young people and the quality of the young men entering the priesthood. I don't want to exaggerate this, but I'm conscious of it happening. And I would like it to be affecting the quality of our religious education teachers. It doesn't quite. I think a lot of young, keen Catholics think, oh, I've had an experience of our Lord. I must work in the pro-life movement full-time. I must go out for street evangelization. Well, the pro-life movement doesn't need a lot of salaried employees. It could be a real problem, that actually. It's sort of, And no, how about becoming a teacher? Yeah. And they sort of think, oh no, that's school. How boring, But we need desperately need good religious education teachers.
Yeah,
really.
This is very common.
Well, I'd like to push that. So these are good things, and the ordinariate's a good thing. There are definitely signs of great hope in the Catholic Church in our country.
That's what you expect in the springtime of evangelization. We want to take a break, come back in a couple minutes to get your questions from our audience. And also want to remind you that Joanna has a blog, a Catholic journalist in London. You can take a look at it by going to EWTN.com/news/blog. And you can take part in the conversation. We'll be back in just a couple minutes and look forward to having your questions. Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. First of all, I want to invite you to come down here and join us. Look, got a little cool today. We've had some real nice weather, but it's a little chilly today, but it's not snowing. I know some of y'all up north are having some snow again, so it's not that. Flowers are blooming, and so it's not that cold.
Oh, it's not cold.
So
nice.
It's pretty to come down here and join us and be part of our studio audience and masses, and our pilgrimage department will help you do that. Just contact them at 205-271-2966 or go to the website EWTN.com and get information there. They'll also let you know about various opportunities, places to stay, and good places to eat. Be up your alley, but it wouldn't be English food. It'd be fried green tomatoes, or at the Arndale Cafe, or barbecue at Golden Rule. Yeah. I don't think y'all eat too much barbecue beef in London. No. So we'd love to have you come over here for that. Okay. All right, you ready for some questions?
Yes, as long as they're not
bet you are. Let's start off with a caller. Hello, we have Evelina on.
Hi, Mrs. Bogle and Father Mitch. How are you?
Fine. Where are you from, Evelina?
Maryland.
Great.
I actually correspond a bit with Auntie Joanna through email.
Okay.
Yes, I know Evelina very well by email. It's simply lovely to be talking, Evelina.
It's nice to hear your voice too on the phone.
Oh, that's great.
And your question is, Evelina?
The question is, Mrs. Bogle, have you ever, I have right here a copy of Chesterton's The Ballad of the White Horse, and the end notes on it mentioned, they said in 994, a story is told on Mary's birthday, September 8th, that she prevented a Viking attack on the city of London somehow or other. I don't know all the information on that, but it sounds like an interesting story. And they said that that is what inspired Chesterton to put Mary in such a prominent position in his poem. And then just the second quick part of the question I had was, have you ever heard of the campion flower? And I know it's called Our Lady's Rose, and I always thought that that was interesting. One, because it's ironically, it has the same name as like St. Edmund Campion, and just the fact that it's called Our Lady's Rose. I don't know how it got that name, so I wasn't sure if you knew any about either of that.
Right.
Well, thanks. Let's start off with the Vikings.
Yes, I know there is a lot about this. And the church I mostly go to is at London Bridge, and so I know a great deal about this. I don't think it was 994. I belong to the school that thinks it was in 1014, and It was certainly on Our Lady's birthday. It was King Sven Forkbeard, the Viking leader, attacking London, and Ethelred, the Saxon king, was in alliance with Olaf of Norway, who was a converted Viking, so he was Christian. They held off the attack. They threw ropes around the pillars supporting London Bridge, rowed hard upstream. London Bridge fell down, so the Vikings, some of them were on the bridge, so they fell into the river, and they then didn't take the city. There's a lot of evidence for this. I'm not convinced of the date that Chesterton uses. I think it was definitely later, but there were a number of Viking attacks, obviously, over a long period, starting in the 9th century and going on. But this is one of the most recent ones, and certainly the general idea, Our Lady Saved London. This is a major theme, actually, in the new series I've just done. So without giving too much away, when you see the series about Marian feasts, you will find a lot about that particular Viking attack. And the reason I got interested is that I led a history walk from Precious Blood Church, the church which is the Catholic parish for that corner of London in the borough, just across the river, obviously, from the city itself. And I was expounding on this Viking attack, and one of the members of the public who joined this history walk said, I don't think you're right. I don't think it was 994. And we had a fascinating discussion about it, standing on the banks, obviously, of the Thames, you see. And then you can feel other people in the history walk thinking, this is all getting a bit boring because they're not all terribly knowledgeable about, you know, the 10th century. And I suddenly realized it's a moment of sheer joy when you realize you've got a whole bunch of Londoners all sitting talking about a Viking battle. Was it 994 or was it 1014? And I don't know why, but I just sort of like the eccentricity of that. And then there was this light bill, and somebody said, couldn't we get on now to, you know, the Globe Theatre and Catherine of Aragon's house nearby and the Marshalsea prison, and there's just so much history in that corner of London. So we moved on, but yes, there's an enormous amount in all of that. Come to London, Avelina. It's just history on every corner.
And you'll guide her around.
Yeah, I'll guide her around. I can't offer accommodation, but there's always somewhere to stay. And come to London. Now, the other one, the campion flower, yes, this is a lovely white flower. I hadn't heard that it was called Our Lady's Rose, but I have always loved the idea that this lovely stem flower with this delicate white top is campion. And I don't know, if I'd ever taken the name of Campion, Edmund Campion being a girl, I would have just chosen the campion part. But I was confirmed when I was young, and I didn't know about it all then, so I took the name Mary. But campion, white flower, yeah, isn't it lovely? Yeah. It's absolutely marvellous.
All right, we have a question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
St. Martinville, Louisiana.
Good to have you here.
Good. Joanna, I understand you're an expert on feasts, and throughout Europe they celebrate the Feast of St. Martin de Tours.
Yeah.
Is that something that's commonly celebrated in England?
In England, not at all. Yes, across much of Europe, obviously in Tours. And when we lived in Germany, they celebrated it then. It's November the 11th, as you know. And in Germany and in France, you make the most gorgeous big paper lanterns. You make a great big paper with a lantern, a lighted candle in, and you hold it on the end of a long stick, and you go wandering around the streets. Absolutely marvellous thing to do. In London, in England, no. But that's because November the 11th, the Feast of St. Martin of Tours, was chosen for the armistice at the end of the Great War, the 11th day of the 11th hour of the 11th month. And so November the 11th for us is Armistice Day.
Yeah, which is pretty much the case in this country.
A very solemn day. We observe the silence and everything.
Sure, sure. We have another caller. Hello, James.
Hello.
Hi, and where are you from?
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Good to have you calling in.
Thank you.
What's your question?
March 25th is Solemnity of the Annunciation of Jesus, the Conception Day of Jesus. So, you know, shouldn't we make that a feast in Universal Church, obviously include England and U.S., but, you know, a feast for all the conceived babies, you know, making a much more pro-life celebration. And the second question is, you know, if the babies in the womb, the conceived babies, isn't a much more positive and accurate term to call them conceived babies, because that's what they are, conceived, as opposed to unborn, something they're not born, or preborn, something they're not yet, but they are conceived. So thank you very much.
All right. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, this was a much discussed subject. The real problem is that March the 25th pretty well always falls in Lent and often in Holy Week. So there's a real problem that you would not be able to celebrate it as a day of life if it's Good Friday or it's Maundy Thursday. It's a real problem that it falls at the most sacred time of the year, which must always take precedence. There was a big discussion whether or not to make it a day for life in England, but this problem, if you can call it a problem, of Lent and Holy Week is such a major one that you'd have to keep shifting it. So we have a day for life on another day instead. But yes, of course it's a day for praying for the unborn, and I personally have never been to a Mass of the Annunciation that didn't include prayers for the protection of babies in the womb. It's such an obvious link. Another possibility is the Feast of the Holy Innocents. And that works, yes. But again, it's very close to Christmas. It's not always easy to organize a prayer vigil or something. People are away from home. There's a need to care for elderly relatives who are with you and give them a nice time. It's not always so easy. So I don't think you can necessarily fix one day, but the Holy Innocents Day would probably be easier. And when I was younger, we used to do prayer vigils on that day. Now it tends to be all year round doing other things and so on. The idea of using the expression conceived babies, yeah, it could be something in it, but I think you can't always announce what you're going to do. The culture sometimes creates its own language, and I didn't used to like the expression pro-life because it looks funny written down like prolif or something, look like a detergent, you know. But now we all use it. So, I mean, start using it and see if it gels. But I'm not convinced it will work quite so well. First, because there's a certain delicacy. Not everybody wants to talk about a conceived baby. They might just prefer to say an unborn child. I don't know. Have a go. But I think unborn baby sort of works.
Yeah. Yeah. And just also as an interesting point, because a lot of people make a mistake about this, you'll hear people say that Christmas is celebrated because of the Roman celebration of Sol Invictus. And of course, March 25th is 9 months before Christmas, and that came from that too. However, the origin of March 25th as the day to celebrate the Annunciation was that was one date that the early church believed was the actual date of the crucifixion. Yes. And that they put the crucifixion as separate, 9 months, different from Christmas. And they made that link between the crucifixion and the birth.
Fits, doesn't it?
And in fact, they had done that in the 2nd century AD to make that link. And Christmas was celebrated already in the 2nd century on the 25th, while Sol Invictus was not celebrated by Romans until the middle of the 3rd century.
I didn't know that.
And, in fact, it may be that they were trying to undo Christmas with their own feast. So, just a little side note.
That's very interesting.
We have a question here from our audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
Midland, Texas.
Good to have you here. And what's your question?
My question is, on your cooking show, do you ever use holy water? Because I use holy water when I cook. It's just something that I've always done. And
no, certainly not. Holy water to me is something you find in church. I wouldn't want to nick it to cook. Then it wouldn't be any left for the others. And also some salt is put in it usually.
Yes.
So, this would be rather inconvenient. You don't necessarily want it to be salty, whatever you're cooking. No, I really don't. I do have holy water in the house. I think most Catholics do. And in particular, I've got one of those dreadful bottles that you bring back from Lourdes where you unscrew Our Lady's blue plastic crown, and I just love having that there. Yes, I use it, but not in cooking.
Now, do you have a lot of demonic activity in your family or something?
No, I just use it because I always tell my daughter that she always says, how did you make these beans so good? I said, a special ingredient called love. And it's really just holy water.
Do you go and ask your priest for a bucket of the stuff or something?
Oh, no. We just have it at home. And there's a church that we always go and get our holy water from.
I see. I suppose one could.
Yeah. And I have known people to use blessed salt when they cook.
Could work.
Yeah, so that's something you can, for those who use salt in the cooking. All right. All right, I have another question from our studio audience. And who are you and where are you from?
Brother David, I grew up in Azusa, California, but right now from Steubenville, Ohio.
Okay, so you're studying for the priesthood?
Yes, currently.
Okay, good. In what order?
The Marians of the Immaculate Conception.
All right, so you're the community that is actually in charge of the Shrine of Divine Mercy.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, fab.
Good. And so what's your question?
I know, Joanna, we were talking about the spices and cooking. I was just wondering what type of meals were you planning to discuss that would be favorite meals for any Marian feast?
Well, with this particular series of Marian feasts, I haven't been doing specific meals as I have when I was going through the calendar for example, particular traditional foods for, Easter and Mothering Sunday and so on. So I simply picked up one or two, for example, for the Annunciation because of the herbs. I discovered that in some parts of the Middle East you make a herb omelette. So I was making a herb omelette for the Feast of the Annunciation, which is sort of New Year dish, also for the Persian New Year and so on.
Also, it's something because in general in the Eastern Church, the Lenten fast excludes eggs.
So this would be something
and
special.
And so you can have eggs on the Feast of the Annunciation.
Yes, that would work.
So that's why.
That's why. But there are lots of nice recipes for different feasts of the year, but interestingly, I found with Mary it was a much more sort of general thing. I haven't found I found one or two, like the herb omelette. But it's not quite like Madeleines for the Feast of St. Madeleine, or all the pumpkin-y stuff that you have for All Souls, or Christmas pudding or whatever. So it's an interesting point. I was talking more about general use of herbs and flowers and songs and activities for children and craft work rather than cooking. So I'll work a bit more on that, actual recipes for Marian feasts. Anybody knows of a really nice dish for the Assumption? Call in.
All right, and one of the other things too is that a lot of the ethnic communities around the world, like you mentioned, the Middle Easterners having the omelet with herbs on the Assumption. A lot of the other ethnic communities have special foods for those feasts that may not be so much used in England.
Yes, I think
but if you can get, perhaps some of the folks from Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean world, Germany, France, and others writing in, if you all know of some of these,
please do.
Please write in to Joanna to let us know about some of these. A lot of Middle Eastern, I'm sure they're Middle Eastern recipes.
Oh, yes, and I have got some woven into my Feasts and Seasons book, but I'm interested in Marian stuff in particular would be I'd love that. Yeah.
I have another question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
My name is PJ Aguirre. I'm from Midland, Texas.
Are you related to the last lady?
That's my mother.
And you're not the reason she has to put holy water in the food, is she?
I certainly hope not, sir.
So what's your question?
I just had a question. Both of y'all can answer this. The fundamental thing always in our family was that we have our discussions, our arguments. We make each other laugh, always before Mass. And no matter what we were going through, we'd always go out to eat afterwards, or go home, have a nice feast at the end of the week or the beginning of the week on Sunday. And my question was, why is it that in our society, why have we gotten away from, those family meals that we?
Yes, I think this is a huge thing, and the absence of the family meal. This again is something that Catholics share a concern about with so many other people. So it's a wonderful thing to discuss because it's a point, if you like, of evangelization. Yes, and I'm conscious that it happens even to those of us who like to make a great fuss of campaigning about it. I was brought up with family meals, and some of my best memories, and you can see I'm smiling as I remember, are of fabulous talking, laughing family meals. A wonderful way of learning your history, folklore, discussions. And you learned so much because you discussed it. You could ask things, and parents would be teaching in a way that wouldn't work if they said, now we're all going to sit down and learn such and such. But it was just your father sharing interesting information, history. Even sometimes getting up and checking something in a book or something at a family meal. And I remember when I was grown up, I'm looking back to childhood, but also once I was grown up, a family meal where you didn't want to leave the table. Your mother would say, oh, come on, we must get to bed. You say, well, why? What's the hurry? Another round of coffee. I loved all of that. I think we should try to revive it. But I do think that the instant food thing is part of it. Do you?
Well, there are a number of things. I think the instant food is, and going out to, a hamburger joint and so on, that's more of a way to deal with the problems. One, you have so many families where both spouses are working, and they're exhausted when they come home, and too exhausted to cook.
Yes.
And so they try to do something together, but it's tough. Secondly, you also have, out of a certain fear that, well, kids got to have a lot of activities to stay out of trouble. So they're on the road from one sporting event or other, or class, and so on. So there's that going on. And then thirdly, and this is a problem that you see in one of my favorite books called The Dumbest Generation, in which so many young people are involved in the social media so much, where they are talking to their peers, they become uninterested in talking or listening to adults.
Yes.
And they don't learn much. So you've got those, plus the breakdown of family, in this country, I don't know how it is in England, but 43% of our children are born to unwed mothers.
Yes, same in
and
England.
so the family is in a chaotic situation, plus a lot of divorce. So these are factors that we need to work on the family itself.
I'm sure that's right. You're absolutely right that it all applies to Britain. In fact, I think our rate of children born out of wedlock is higher. It's edging up to 50%, about half. And the dreadful problem with the mobile phone, it should be put the mobile phone down. If the telephone, mobile or any other thing, rings during a meal, sorry, we're eating. So unless somebody's waiting for an emergency call about granny or something, off, it's not possible. And I've had friends who've organised a family meal only to discover that younger members of the family bring their mobile phone and sit doing this during the meal without
Exactly.
talking.
That's exactly what I mean by.
And to me, this should be
contacting only peers.
And there is a problem with this because imposing any kind of discipline is difficult. I remember we had a marvellous discussion about this at a Catholic women's group discussion session, and one mother said one of her daughters had behaved badly about this, so the phone was confiscated. It's going to be returned in so many days' time. And, mild family punishment, and it was taken away and so on. And the daughter was very cross and so on. But then she was given a mobile phone by her friend the next day. Yeah. Because that's the culture that there's, whereas at one time you could impose a mild family punishment like that because the technology, that was it. You couldn't then get another phone. So there are sheer practical things, the availability of the social media, the impossibility of cancelling it.
One of the things we discussed on my radio show today is for Lent, giving up the social media. No Facebook, no that for Lent.
It's doable,
Let's go
isn't it?
to another caller. Hello, Robert.
Yes, this is Robert.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm from Illinois.
Okay.
And I have a statement with a question. We have so many different people in the Anglican faith that I have in my town here 3 churches here of the Anglican faith, but they were never approached by any Catholic to take and answer their questions. And why is this so? Why are we so afraid to take and give them the information about coming over? And another thing, I would like to see the Anglican Mass on EWTN for those who are Anglican to take witness to this, to bring them back to the faith.
Now, Robert, were you able to go to any of those churches yourself and invite some of those folks?
Yes. And
Good.
They said they were never approached, and they are losing their membership.
So, do you have a response to that?
Well, I suppose every situation is different. But when Pope Benedict issued Anglicanorum Cetibus, this was a dramatic breakthrough because for some, in fact for a good many Anglicans, a feeling among the clergy, I cannot leave my people, that they trust me, we've made a journey of faith together, was huge. And there was also a feeling, do you have to turn your back on everything you might have achieved as a little Anglican community where the prayers of no value and so on? Well, Catholics have never taught they were of no value. But in making Anglicanorum Cetibus, in making this call to groups of Anglicans, Pope Benedict was saying, you have something to give, you have something to bring, and bring it to the universal church. So he has made the call, and yes, we then have to make that call our own. In Britain, there has been quite a response, and some 80 clergy and associated laity came into the full communion. They don't, however, all use the Anglican form of service, because part of the irony is that some of these Anglican groups, the ones that were keenest to become united with the universal church, were using the Roman Rite anyway, using the Roman Rite in English. They used exactly the ordinary form of the Mass, so, but with much nicer music.
Yeah, they do have good music. But what we don't have is time. We've flat run out. But I think that's a good point that Robert makes, that we should make that invitation. Thank you very much for coming to do another series with us, for joining us tonight. And let me give you my blessing. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And of course, we'd like to remind you, we can bring you Joanna to do her series and bring her updates on the news in England and cooking shows and everything else she does, plus all the other series on this show, because this network is brought to you by you. You make it possible with your donations. So please keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill, and we will be able to pay our bills too. Thank you.